Is this what you call documentation? Chris Patterson barked, holding up a printed page like it was covered in rat droppings. Looks like something my nephew would make in middle school computer class. He smirked around the room like he just cracked the world's funniest joke. Nobody laughed. I'm Tony Martinez, 48 years old, and I kept my face still, poker flat. Inside, I wanted to shove that page straight down his protein-choked throat. It was my third week back from leading a crisis migration for our biggest client and my first team meeting with the founder's son, Chris, installed as chief strategy officer. He'd joined the company 2 years ago after tanking 2 startups and coasting on the Patterson last name. The founder, Mr. Patterson, thought giving his boy some real-world experience would straighten him out. What we got was unlimited condescension and button-downs so tight you could see his ego bulging through. Here I was, 12 years at Patterson Technologies. Started when I was 36, right after my divorce, looking for stability while raising 2 kids. Not on the masthead, not on the investor decks, but everywhere that mattered. The platform backend, me. The DevOps automation stack that kept our releases sane, me. The emergency patch that saved us from a class action when the API leaked user data in 2020, also me. Most folks in the office knew. They came to me when things broke or when someone needed a miracle. Chris didn't get the memo, or maybe he did and just didn't care. In the beginning, I let it slide, wore my patience like armor. You can't win every fight. And I had code to write, servers to monitor, a tech stack that whispered to me in ways no MBA ever could. Besides, I'd seen nepotism flame out before. It usually does eventually. But Chris had other plans, started creeping into places he didn't belong. Strategy meetings, sprint planning, even architecture reviews. One Thursday, he looked me dead in the eye and said, "Eventually, we'll just rebuild it all. Get some fresh devs in. Younger energy." I smiled, said nothing. I didn't need to. Everyone else in the room looked like they just witnessed a car accident in slow motion. Quick note, if you've ever sat in a meeting like that, if you've ever been talked down to by someone who couldn't debug a toaster, you know the rage. I mean the slow burn, the bone-deep knowledge that if you vanished tomorrow, the whole place would grind to a halt and no one at the top would notice until the lights went out. I wish I could say Chris stopped there, but he didn't. Started referring to me in meetings as the legacy developer. Not our senior architect, not Tony, just the legacy developer. Like I was some outdated mainframe with a vendetta against progress. "Let's get the legacy developer's opinion," he'd say, turning to me with a grin, usually after he'd pitched some idiotic plan to gut our backend and leverage AI synergies. I wish I were kidding. The man once tried to mint an NFT of our company logo. By quarter's end, I was working double shifts, handling my normal workload and quietly fixing the messes his new hires made. He brought in this one guy, Brandon Murphy, who used to sell crypto fitness apps and spelled cash like it rhymed with nacho. I spent 3 straight nights rewriting his code before it took down production. But still, I stayed. Had to. Sarah's cancer treatments weren't fully covered by insurance. The experimental drugs ran us $3,000 a month out of pocket. My daughter Emma was starting her sophomore year at State, another $15,000 we didn't have lying around. My son Jake was a senior, looking at graduate programs. At 48, with 2 kids in college and medical bills piling up, starting over wasn't exactly appealing. And I believed in the mission, or at least the version of it we started with, before Chris turned it into a playground for buzzwords and daddy's money. Then came the investor pitch deck. One of the junior PMs accidentally forwarded it to me, said it was for internal alignment. I opened it while waiting for a build to deploy. That's when my stomach dropped through the floor. Slide after slide, charts, projections, licensing strategies, all centered on my platform, my architecture, my database schema. Only now it wasn't mine. There was no mention of me anywhere, no credit, just language like fully proprietary internal innovations and exclusive Patterson Technologies IP. I checked the file history. Chris had edited it multiple times over the past month, and the cherry on top, a quote block that read, "Built from the ground up by our strategic leadership team." I didn't scream, I didn't throw anything. I just closed the laptop, took a walk around the block, and came back inside like nothing happened. Because in that moment, something clicked. This wasn't just disrespect. This was theft. Strategic, calculated theft. I was about to make it the most expensive mistake of Chris's career. The funny thing about building something from scratch, if you never signed it away, it's still yours. And I was starting to remember that I might have forgotten to sign something very important. 12 years ago, when we were all just caffeine-addled idealists trying to change the world. The next time I saw that deck, it had logos from 2 major venture funds slapped across the intro slide and one nauseating title, Scaling the Future, Proprietary Infrastructure and IP in the Modern Cloud Era. I nearly choked on my vending machine trail mix. Chris couldn't even spell infrastructure last month without autocorrect and divine intervention. Then came the meeting. Monday, 10 a.m. Conference room so cold it felt like a morgue with whiteboards. Chris strolled in wearing this smug Patagonia vest like he just finished solving world hunger at a golf course. Mr. Patterson sat at the head of the table, beaming with pride at his boy's vision. "We've got serious interest from Praxis Group and maybe Goldline Ventures," Chris announced like he'd single-handedly summoned them from the heavens. "They love the tech stack, they're talking acquisition, not just investment." I raised my eyebrows. Did they have questions about the code-base architecture? He waved me off like I was asking about the cafeteria menu. "They're not investing in individual lines of code, Tony. They're investing in the vision, the scalability, the future. We'll just modernize everything if needed. Fresh perspective, you know?" He didn't even look at me when he said it, like I was a piece of outdated equipment they'd eventually haul to the dumpster. The room went still. Even Brandon, whose greatest technical achievement was syncing his Fitbit, looked uncomfortable. I didn't respond. Not right away. I just clicked my pen 3 times, wrote one word on my notepad: war. The rest of the day rolled on like nothing had happened. Except now Chris was on fire, strutting through the halls like he was Moses with a term sheet, hosting synergy huddles and exit alignment strategy briefings. I swear he made up half the terminology just to hear himself talk. The real punch came later that week. Friday afternoon, an internal all-hands meeting streamed for remote staff. Chris stood in front of a slide labeled Core IP Ownership and said, clear as day, every line of code in our stack, built in-house, proprietary, scalable, 100% Patterson Technologies owned. I nearly dislocated my jaw from how hard it clenched. Mr. Patterson nodded along proudly, like his son had just recited the Gettysburg Address. Afterward, I cornered one of the product managers in the break room. "Who put together that ownership slide?" He hesitated, stirring his coffee like it held the secrets of the universe. "Chris, I think." Said it came from Legal Review. "Legal Review?" I asked. "What legal? Chad from procurement or Sheila from HR? Because unless we hired an actual IP lawyer last week, I am the legal department when it comes to platform ownership." He looked like he wanted to disappear into his coffee mug. "I don't know, Tony. Maybe you should talk to him directly." "Right. Talk to Chris. Like having a reasonable conversation with a lit cigarette while standing in a gas station." Instead, I went home and did what I should have done months ago. I pulled up my old email archive, the one no one remembered I kept, back when Patterson Technologies was still a scrappy garage startup, and I was building our prototype backend between freelance gigs and sleepless nights trying to keep the lights on after my divorce. The original contracts were in a shared Google folder from before we had real lawyers, before we had proper payroll, before Chris even knew the company existed. That's when I saw it, the original LLC formation documents. 2 names on the incorporation papers, the founder and mine. But that was just for equity split and company formation. The IP filing was something completely different. I found it buried deep in an old folder I'd labeled TAM 2019 Patents Draft. My hands started shaking as I opened the PDF file. There it was, clear as daylight. Technical specification and architecture for modular backend microservice system filed with the USPTO under Tony Anthony Martinez, sole proprietor. No transfer agreements, no assignment clauses, no corporate ownership language, just my name, my design, my intellectual property. I double-checked the timestamps. I had submitted the patent application on March 3, 2019. The company incorporation date, March 18, 2019. A full 2 weeks later. I leaned back in my kitchen chair and it creaked like it knew something fundamental had just shifted in the universe. According to federal law, Patterson Technologies had never actually owned the core platform they were trying to sell. They'd been building on my foundation for 12 years without ever securing the legal rights. I didn't even mean to keep ownership. We were moving so fast back then, working 18-hour days, living on takeout and energy drinks. Legal paperwork was always, "We'll handle that later" territory. Except later never came. And now, 12 years later, Chris was about to sell my life's work to venture capitalists and cut me out entirely. The irony was beautiful in the most twisted way possible. While he'd been calling me the legacy developer, treating me like outdated equipment, he'd been building his entire acquisition strategy on technology he didn't actually own. I sat there in my kitchen for a long time, staring at that document. Sarah was upstairs sleeping off her latest chemo session. The medical bills were stacked on the counter next to college tuition invoices. At 48, I was supposed to be hitting my stride, setting up for a comfortable retirement. Instead, I was watching some entitled kid try to steal 12 years of my work and leave me with nothing but a thanks for playing handshake. That's when I realized something important. This wasn't about revenge. This wasn't about getting back at Chris for being a condescending waste of oxygen. This was about survival, about protecting what I'd built, about making sure my family's future didn't get steamrolled by someone who'd never written a line of production code in his life. I opened a fresh legal pad, uncapped a red pen, and wrote one sentence in block letters: "Get a lawyer," quietly. Then I underlined it 3 times because some decisions deserve emphasis. I didn't sleep that night, just stared at the ceiling while the fans spun in lazy circles, mocking me. The bourbon I'd used to steady my nerves had turned to acid in my throat. My laptop glowed from the kitchen table like it was daring me to reopen that patent folder. What if I was wrong? What if I'd signed something and forgotten? What if there was some clause buried in employment paperwork that I'd missed? At 3 a.m., doubt is a powerful drug. I started questioning everything: my memory, my documentation, even whether I was just a bitter employee looking for a payday. By 4 a.m., I had every old hard drive I owned stacked on the coffee table like electronic pancakes, cables snaking everywhere. I was cross-referencing contracts, emails, drafts of drafts. Every file, every email chain, every "let's loop Tony in" for back-end context message from the early days. I searched for anything that even remotely resembled an IP assignment clause. And every time I came up empty, my heart beat a little louder. But doubt makes you thorough. I went through 5 years of email archives, Slack exports, even old Trello boards where I'd documented the original system architecture. What I found was better than I'd hoped. A complete paper trail of me describing, designing, and building the platform from scratch. All time-stamped, all verifiable, all mine. When the sun finally came up, I did what I always do when I'm spiraling. I called Harry Williams. Harry had been my mentor back at my first real job out of college. He'd been the only guy over 45 in a sea of 20-something hotshots, building database engines that still power half the hospitals in Florida. Now retired, Harry spent his days doing crosswords and terrorizing his homeowners association. I expected sympathy, maybe some grandfatherly wisdom. What I got was Harry at full volume, slurping coffee and dropping truth bombs like a retired drill sergeant. "Check the damn paperwork," he barked before I even finished explaining. "Built it before incorporation? Then unless you assigned it, it's yours. Period. You're not being paranoid, kid. You're being slow." Slow? I blinked, holding the phone away from my ear. He didn't pause. Guys like Chris count on that. Count on you being polite, being unsure, being the good soldier who doesn't rock the boat. But Tony, that boat sailed the minute he called you legacy. You built the damn engine. Now go find out who legally owns it. I sat there stunned, then actually laughed for the first time in weeks. Thanks, Harry. Don't thank me yet. Get a lawyer and call me when you're rich enough to buy me dinner somewhere that doesn't have a drive-thru. After hanging up, I did what I should have done immediately. I pulled up the USPTO database, searched my name, filtered by 2019, and there it was. Application number 143T, TAM 2019, filed March 3, 2019. Title: Modular Cloud Microservice Backbone for Scalable Web Infrastructure. Owner: Tony Anthony Martinez. Status: active. Transfers: none. Then I cross-checked Patterson Technologies Incorporation date. March 18th, 2019. 15 days after I'd filed the patent. I leaned back in my chair, and it creaked like it was congratulating me. In the eyes of federal law, Patterson Technologies had been building their entire business on intellectual property they'd never actually acquired. No assignment agreement, no licensing deal, no post-incorporation transfer. Nothing. The law office smelled like leather and expensive coffee. Not the kind of place that welcomes walk-ins wearing cargo pants and a conference t-shirt from 2018, but I wasn't there to impress anyone. I was there to plant a very specific flag. "Let me guess," said the attorney before I'd even sat down. "Startup, no formal IP assignment, and now they're shopping your work to investors like they own it outright." I blinked. "You see this often?" Roger Coleman smiled like a dentist who'd found an interesting cavity. "Every month. Tech guys build first, paperwork second. Usually works out fine until someone gets greedy." He was late 40s, soft-spoken, wearing a suit that cost more than my car. His office walls were lined with framed patents like family photos. "I'm not here to destroy them," I said quickly. "I just want to protect what's mine." Roger folded his hands. "Smart approach. Litigation is expensive and time-consuming. But securing your rights and letting their potential buyers discover the ownership issue during due diligence? That's chess, not checkers." He slid a form across his desk. "Let's file a formal confirmation of ownership with the USPTO, update the public record, add current contact information, establish a clear timeline. If they never had proper assignment, this will make it impossible to ignore during any serious acquisition review." Over the next 2 weeks, I built what Roger called the most comprehensive IP documentation package he'd seen in years. Every Git commit from my personal repository showing original code development. Every Slack message where I'd explained the architecture to teammates. Every email where I'd walked someone through the system design. Every late-night troubleshooting session I'd logged. Code doesn't lie, timestamps don't forget, and unlike Chris, I'd never deleted my digital footprints. The best piece of evidence came from an old email thread I'd forgotten about. Our original CTO, long since departed, had written to the whole team. "Just want everyone to know that Tony's platform architecture is the backbone of everything we do here. Without his design, we'd still be running on duct tape and prayer." I tagged it, indexed it, backed it up in triplicate. Roger reviewed everything with the methodical precision of a man who'd seen corporate betrayal in every flavor imaginable. "This is bulletproof," he said, closing the folder. "If I were their general counsel, I'd be updating my resume right now. I'm still not trying to hurt anyone," I repeated. He looked at me with something that might have been respect. "You don't need to hurt them. The truth will do that just fine." Within 72 hours, my updated patent filing was public record. All I had to do now was wait for someone smart enough to look. It was a Tuesday when everything exploded. I was reviewing a pull request for the new billing module when I heard elevator doors slam open down the hall, fast footsteps, then shouting, "Why the hell have you been talking to lawyers about us?" Chris's voice hit like a car alarm duct taped to a megaphone. Every head in the engineering pod snapped up. Monitors froze mid-scroll. Someone dropped their energy drink. Didn't turn around immediately. I saved my work first, committed my changes, then swiveled my chair slowly like I had all the time in the world. Chris was red-faced, neck vein bulging, holding a stack of printed emails with the kind of fury usually reserved for people who discover their spouse cheating. He stormed past the cubicles straight into my workspace, waving those papers like evidence of war crimes. "These messages! You used company email to contact outside legal counsel. Do you have any idea what kind of liability exposure this creates for us?" I looked at him calmly. "I do. You should read the headers more carefully. I BCC'd myself on everything. Want the full thread?" That's when Chris went nuclear. "You're done. Done. Effective immediately. Security will escort you out. HR is already being notified." I didn't argue, didn't plead, didn't ask for explanations or pull some dramatic "you'll regret this" routine like they do in movies. Instead, I reached under my monitor and pulled out the small blue USB drive I'd kept there for 3 years like a fire extinguisher. No company code on it, just my personal documentation, my own records, everything I had legal rights to. I stood up, smoothed down my shirt, closed my laptop with a soft click that sounded louder than all the shouting. "You want security to walk me out?" Chris asked, performing for the audience he knew was watching from behind half-closed applications. "That won't be necessary," I said. "I know the way." As I walked toward the exit, I could hear whispers through the glass conference rooms. Chris was already spinning the story to anyone who'd listen. "Unhinged," he was saying. "Been talking nonsense about ownership claims. Snapped when we asked him to improve his attitude. Dead weight," I heard him tell the finance director. "Legacy thinking only gets you so far. Legacy thinking." The irony was beautiful. 2 days later, my phone rang. California area code, professional voice. "Tony Martinez? This is Daniel Foster with the legal team at Orbit Strategic Capital. We're conducting IP due diligence for a potential transaction involving Patterson Technologies. We've come across some interesting filings in your name. Would you be available for a brief conversation?" He didn't need to say more. Orbit was serious money. The kind of investment firm that sends entire legal teams into data rooms and unearths every skeleton with forensic precision. "I'm available," I said, "as long as we keep this factual." "Were you the original architect of the platform backend?" "Yes." "Did you file intellectual property protection before the company's incorporation?" "Yes." March 3, 2019. 2 weeks before they filed articles of incorporation. "And do you recall signing any assignment agreements transferring those rights to Patterson Technologies?" "I do not. I've searched thoroughly. There was never any formal transfer." Pause. Keyboard clicking. "Thank you, Mr. Martinez. This has been very helpful. We may need to follow up." A week later, Daniel called back. Their representation didn't go as planned. When pressed about IP ownership, someone in leadership claimed full proprietary control on record. Our AI flagged the discrepancy before they finished the sentence. The final meeting was supposed to be routine, last round of due diligence before signing. Chris wore his best performance hoodie, leaning back in his chair like he was already spending acquisition money. Mr. Patterson sat beside him, beaming with paternal pride. Then Daniel shared his screen. "We just need clarification on one item. Page 23 of your technical documentation lists the platform infrastructure owner as Tony Anthony Martinez, sole proprietor. Can someone walk us through this?" Chris didn't even look at the screen, just stared directly into the camera with complete confidence. "That's outdated information. Tony was part of the early development team, but all proprietary code belongs to Patterson Technologies. Has since day one." Daniel's voice stayed perfectly calm. "According to USPTO records, Mr. Martinez filed this patent 2 weeks before your company's incorporation. We don't see any assignment agreements in the documents you've provided." Chris started flipping through papers off-screen like he could manifest a contract through sheer willpower. Daniel turned to Mr. Patterson. "Can you confirm whether a formal IP transfer was ever executed?" The founder cleared his throat. Tony was part of the team from the beginning. "It was understood. Implied ownership. I'm sorry, but implied ownership doesn't supersede federal filings." The silence that followed could have powered a small city. Someone's jaw tightened. Another person quietly closed their laptop. Chris broke first. "Look, we've made substantial modifications since then. We've completely rebuilt huge portions. We conducted a line-by-line analysis. 35% of your current production code base still matches the original prototype, including core architectural elements and critical scaling modules referenced in your investor materials." Mr. Patterson went pale. Chris looked like he'd been struck by lightning. Without a formal assignment or licensing agreement, Patterson Technologies does not currently hold legal ownership of the infrastructure you're marketing to our firm. This represents a fundamental acquisition risk. The call ended there. No shouting, no drama. Just a quiet, professional, absolutely devastating conclusion. 3 days later, exclusive acquisition talks collapse after IP ownership dispute. 6 months later, I'm running my own consulting firm, helping experienced engineers document their work properly. The first thing I tell them, always know who owns what you build. "Chris, last I heard he's selling insurance in Phoenix. Turns out vision and synergy don't count for much when the foundation cracks." Mr. Patterson called me personally to negotiate the licensing deal. We settled on $120,000 initially, tripled to $360,000 after I politely declined their first offer. Nothing personal, just business. When I signed those papers, I looked across the table at their lawyer and said with every ounce of calm I'd earned through 12 years of early mornings and late nights, "Tell the Pattersons I don't hold grudges, I hold receipts. Some lessons are expensive. This one cost them everything.